The meeting is now called to order. Roll call, Mr. Shapiro.
All members are present.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Typically, next on our agenda is public comment. However, this evening we do not have anyone signed up for public comment. So the next part of our agenda is consent. Tonight, the consent items are the personnel report, claims, and payroll. This consent part of our meeting agenda is the designated section where routine items are grouped together for efficient consideration and approval in a single motion. So we will only be doing one motion and discussion. Again, these typically include kind of the business part of our board meetings, which is why we are here gathered this evening. Do I have a motion to approve the consent items?
Motion to approve the consent items.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we will now vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Up next then after that is our workshop topic, the science of reading. Dr. Dudley.
Thank you. So this evening, we're very excited to present to you the science of reading, and we have Mrs. Anna Arroyo, one of our directors of curriculum instruction and assessment, that's going to lead us off, and we also have a third grade teacher and some of our third grade students that are going to help us. So if I could invite you all down to the tables there, and then Mrs. Arroyo will kick it off.
All right, thank you. Bring your books if you have your books with you. And maybe a pen. I don't think you'll need one. We're going to work with some posters. And we do have a couple extra copies in case you need to find evidence from the text later on when you're working with the kids. Okay, so while you're getting settled, I am excited to share with you about the science of reading. And our agenda today is really going to be to first spend some time building some background knowledge for you all about what do we mean when we talk about science of reading. We're going to really look deeply at that definition. We're actually going to study some theoretical models, which I know will be very exciting for you all. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what programs that we have in Carmel Clay Schools, specifically in our K-5 classrooms, that are aligned with the science of reading. Then we're going to bring our honored guests, our experts here, our third grade students from Cherry Tree Elementary, and their teacher, Mr. Lance and Mrs. Taylor, and they are going to come on up, and they're going to lead us through a demonstration of the science of reading in action for one little part of a lesson that they're working on in class. And then we'll finish our lesson today with just questions or comments that you have for me, or more importantly, for our students. So I've already briefed the students on how they use the microphones if they want to ask questions, so they are ready to try those out. So feel free to ask the kids any questions. Okay, so let's just start with the basics. What is the science of reading? So this is the definition from the Reading League. The Reading League is a national organization. It's a not-for-profit that is led by educators and research experts, dedicated to promoting the science-based approaches to teaching reading to their fellow educators, making what was once only accessible to researchers accessible to the teachers, the people who need that information the most. This is the definition. I'm going to read it to you. The science of reading is a vast, interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. The research has been conducted over the last 5 decades across the world, and it's derived from thousands of studies conducted in multiple languages. The science of reading has culminated in a preponderance of evidence to inform how proficient reading and writing develop, why some have difficulty, and how we can most effectively assess and teach and, therefore, improve student outcomes through prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. And then this is actually, it's also derived from researchers in multiple fields. So this is not just one person who says, hey, this is the science of reading, everybody do this, buy all these materials. It's actually coming from lots of different research and lots of different fields. So we're looking at cognitive psychology, communication sciences, developmental psychology, education, special education, implementation science, linguistics, neuroscience, school psychology. All of the research from these different fields has come together to really help us define how do we as educators help kids become proficient readers and writers. And Indiana is fully supportive of the science of reading and has actually enacted legislation around science of reading. So in February 2022, the IDOE published their Indiana's Priority for Early Literacy guidance, which presented a rigorous analysis and a set of goals to address literacy for Hoosier students. This plan also presented a vision and mission for the future of literacy in Indiana, which included an emphasis on the science of reading. In 2023, during the legislative session, Indiana actually legislated a definition of the science of reading. So when we look at this definition, it very closely mirrors what we see from the Reading League here. And then finally, in 2024, the IDOE recommended a short list of K-5 core reading programs for districts to choose from that align not only with the Indiana academic standards, but also align with the research base that is the science of reading. So there are only 5 programs currently on that list for us to pick from when we're picking core programs. Okay, so we are going to start with some theoretical models. Learning how to read and comprehend is a very complex process. So we look to this very easy to understand theoretical model called the simple view of reading to help us understand what it takes to learn how to read. So this information tells us that, in fact, learning to read is not a product of word recognition, not a sum of word recognition and language comprehension. It's actually a product of those two pieces together. So, for example, if I look at word recognition is the ability to transform print into spoken language. Language comprehension is the ability to understand spoken language. And when we talk about language comprehension here, we're talking about for all learners. This is not about learning how to speak English or not speak English. This is about what we have to do as English speakers to be able to understand what is said to us or what we're reading. These two pieces, when multiplied, equal reading comprehension. So for example, if we're talking about word recognition, let's say a student doesn't know how to lift any of the words off the page. They can't read any of those words. So we would say in our multiplication problem that word recognition is 0. They can't read the words on the page. However, if you're telling the student about something, they might have a sophisticated vocabulary or maybe have lots of background knowledge on a certain topic. They're not able to read the words, but if you're telling them and talking to them about a topic, they might be actually really strong in language comprehension. However, when we're looking to measure reading comprehension and are they a skilled reader, the product of reading comprehension there will still be 0. They need to be able to read the words on the page, understand the language of those words to become a skilled, to be able to read and comprehend. The inverse is also true. If you have a student that is really good at reading all the words on the page, but let's say they have a very limited vocab, or maybe they haven't been exposed to a lot of language. Maybe they've spent maybe a little bit too much time on tablets or TV. They maybe don't have enough language or vocab or background knowledge about a topic. The product of reading comprehension is going to be diminished. It's still going to be 0. You have to have both word recognition and language comprehension in order to be a skilled and proficient reader. Even if you have some of the ability to read the words and some language, when we multiply those two together, we're still looking at really struggling, it's a real struggle for the student to read and comprehend. So we're going to put the simple view of reading to the test. I'm going to give you a little reading comprehension test. Kids, watch the adults because they're going to have a little hard time here, I think. Now, I'm going to give you a 3rd grade reading passage, And I'm going to ask you to talk at your table in a moment and tell your table mates the main idea of this paragraph and the key ideas or the key details that support the main idea. This is a third grade reading standard, so you should be great. You'll be great. Okay, so here is the first passage. And I have written this with blanks so that if you were a reader, you would be able to read this passage with 70% accuracy. So anything is a blank is a word that you cannot read. So go ahead and take a moment to read. Okay, turn and talk. What's the main idea and key details supported in this passage? Come on, it's third grade. Okay, I'm going to bring you back. I think we're having some trouble. All right, I'm going to make it a little bit easier for you. I'm going to move this up to 80% accuracy. 80% is pretty good. We know like failing is 50%, 60%, 80%. That's pretty close to 100. You should be good with this one. So let me give you 80% accuracy. Go ahead. Okay, turn and talk. What is the main idea of this passage and what key details support the main idea? Yeah, there's kind of something kind of strange there, isn't there, about animals? Like, I thought we were talking about gardening, maybe plants, and now we're talking about animals. Okay, so let me show you what the actual passage is. The title of this passage is called Unusual Gardens. Take a moment to read that. So how did accuracy and being able to read the words impact your reading comprehension? Helped a lot. The more words you had, the better you were able to read and comprehend. You may know how to find main idea and details of something that you understand and can read the words, but if I take away some of those words, no matter how proficient you are in that skill of knowing main idea and details, it's not going to help you unless you can read the words on the page. So going back to our simple view, that first time around, you were about 70% accuracy. That's not too bad, but it really impacted your language comprehension, the ability to understand what that was about. Again, if we do our multiplication problem here, your reading comprehension is severely diminished. Even when we moved it up to 80%, I'm spitballing numbers here, but you probably could understand, I could hear a little bit more, you had a better understanding of what that passage was about. There were still some things that maybe weren't quite clear, but even with that, you're still looking at about a 0.40 ability to comprehend that, which is not great. If you were taking iRead or iLearn, this would not be looking great for you right now. Okay, so now let's look, we kind of studied word recognition. Now let's talk about language comprehension. This is important for you to see. There's no comprehension strategy powerful enough to compensate for the inability to read the words. And that is why in Carmel Clay Schools we have made a concerted effort over the last 10 years or plus, really making sure that our students are capable on the word recognition side of this formula. You have to get that. The earlier we can get to kids to do that well, the stronger they're going to be in reading in the future. So we really are trying to, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but we can't teach comprehension strategies that are going to make up for the fact if they can't read the words on the page. All right, so let's do another test. I'd like you again, third grade passage, tell me what the main idea of this paragraph is and what key details support the main idea. Okay, you ready? And you're pretty proficient readers, so you should be able to read all the words on this page. You're going to read it silently to yourself. Okay, turn and talk. What's the main idea and key details of this paragraph? Okay, let's come back together. So I heard somebody say they maybe had a little bit of background knowledge about the title about this topic, which gave them a strong advantage. This is a newspaper article about a cricket match. So knowing that information, just quickly read it to yourself one more time. Still probably didn't help some of you, absolutely. So background knowledge really is a gatekeeper. So if you know something about cricket, you're already 10 steps ahead of everybody else. If you know just a little bit about cricket, you're probably okay. But there are some other things happening in this paragraph that are also really difficult. If you were a third grade reader or a fifth grade reader coming in with limited background knowledge on cricket, you might have the benefit if you know a little bit about baseball. You might be able to pull some of that background knowledge in to help you. Finding main idea and details might be pretty tricky. If this was an ACT passage, an SAT, I read, I learn, you might really struggle if you don't first and foremost have that background knowledge. But there's also some other language things happening here that make this exceedingly complex. We have some really specific, content-specific vocab to cricket in this passage. So a judged leg before, that is a very specific cricket term. I think with my very limited knowledge, I think it's something like being offsides. We have batsman. You might know a little, have a guess what that is if you know about baseball, but batsman, that's a pretty specific cricket term. Wicket, I played croquet with my grandmother in her backyard. I kind of know what a wicket is. I know Alice in Wonderland. I don't know exactly how it relates to cricket, but at least I can kind of get an idea this is about sports, something that maybe would go through something that looks like a croquet wicket. So I need to know all this vocab that's very content specific to cricket first. Then there's a lot of language in here that you have to have a depth of understanding of vocab and language that are words you probably already know, but maybe don't know in this context. So this word, perished. I know perish usually means something died, but is this article about two players that died playing cricket? I don't think so. It's probably about they lost the game or something bad happened during the game. I'd also need to know this dreaded. I know what dreaded is. I know what finger is, but what does that have to do with cricket? Well, this is really what the umpire, whatever they call it in cricket, I don't know. I just know baseball, which is helping me. What the umpire is telling them, you're out, or something along those lines. Then we have some verbal reasoning that you have to engage in to understand this. So this phrase, bar the pyrotechnics. I know the meaning of bar, but I'm not sure what it is here in this context. Pyrotechnics is blowing something up. Are we talking about blowing something up in a cricket match? Probably not. This is a metaphor that's telling us about Michael Clark, that he's just this amazing player. So I have to engage in this very simple passage in really complex language structures in order to understand it. And then this one is the kicker. This is something new for us in Carmel Clay Schools. We've really not spent a lot of time working on, but it's been a game changer as we start to work with kids on this, and that is syntax. So look at this first sentence. Much depended on the two overnight batsmen. This is a really unique sentence structure. You don't normally see much as a subject, dependent on the as a verb. This structure is very unusual. So if you're a reader who doesn't have strong language, maybe you're not reading a lot, maybe you're not engaging a lot of oral language at home, you read this as the first sentence, you're sunk. You're like, I don't even know what to do with this. This doesn't even make sense. So all of this, first and foremost, is background knowledge. But then there's all this complex language that's embedded in this paragraph that we have to teach students how to engage with. Okay, so let's go back to our simple view. So you were all able, I am sure, to read that passage without too many problems with decoding. But depending on your background knowledge, you might have known some of the words and could probably kind of fake your way through some of it. Maybe you were at a 0.5. And again, that's going to severely diminish your reading comprehension, even if you can read all the words on the page. All right, so we're going to take you into a second theoretical model. So we've talked about the simple view. We're going to talk now about Scarborough's reading rope, which is related to the simple view. So if we turn that simple view on its side, This is going to help us understand all those parts that make up language comprehension and word recognition. And those strands that you find in this rope, that is what our programming helps us teach into. So this helps us know how to teach reading. In the past, you might have heard, well, we're going to read something and you're going to find the main idea and details. That's not teaching the process of reading. That's teaching kids to give a product of comprehension. That's not instructing, that's a product. We have to instruct into these strands if we want to change the product, which is reading comprehension. So when we look at word recognition is really the ability to decode, so being able to read a word that you don't know and work your way through it. It's also phonological awareness, which is being able to hear the syllables in a word, being able to hear the sounds within a word, and then it's also sight recognition of word. So that's being able to instantaneously read a word without even thinking about it. Everything you're reading is sight words for you. If you come to a word that you don't know, let's say you're reading a science text, a chemistry text, and there's a word that you come across that you've never seen before, even as proficient readers, you're probably going to lean into that decoding one more time, be like, oh, it's this. I'm going to think about my PA, my phonological awareness. And now that word instantaneously, as a proficient reader, becomes a sight word for you. Okay, all words we want to become sight words for our readers. Then we have the language comprehension strands. So when we're talking about language, the two most important parts, as I kind of talked about earlier, I call them kind of the gateway, are that background knowledge and vocab. Those two really are interrelated, and you'll notice this was new learning for me just last week after talking about this for a long time, that background knowledge and vocab are actually intertwined. So the more you know about something, the more vocab you have. The more vocab, these two work, they work together, they're integrated. So in order to become a proficient reader or writer, you have to have things that you know a lot about, just like our cricket match. Having that background knowledge about cricket and baseball supported your ability to be able to read and understand. Having that more that depth of vocab also helped you know how to read and comprehend that text. In addition, you have your language structures, that syntax, semantics, grammar, like that very first sentence we looked at in that paragraph, verbal reasoning, the ability to inference. No writer writes for anybody and tells you every single thing that they want you to think about as you're reading. You have to infer. They use metaphor, they use similes. Those are really important to be able to comprehend, even if you can read the words on the page. And then literacy knowledge, that's print concepts, that's knowing different genres, that's knowing different text structures. Those are some of the skills of reading. All of these strands work together alongside word recognition to develop skilled readers. And this comes from reading researcher and professor Hugh Katz. He says that reading comprehension is not a skill someone learns and then can apply in different reading contexts. It's one of the most complex behaviors that we engage in on a regular basis. And our ability to comprehend is dependent upon a wide range of skills and knowledge. So instead of just reading scattershot, pieces of text that don't interrelate, that don't teach the kids anything about the world around them, we have to focus in on building that knowledge, building that vocab, and working those language strands in. Just working on skills in isolation does not develop skilled readers. So I'm going to bring up next Megan Schoaf. Megan Schoaf is our K-12 district literacy specialist. She's also our dyslexia specialist for the district and is a trained LETTERS facilitator. LETTERS is a professional development program specifically centered on the science of reading. It's highly vetted and recommended by the Department of Ed. And she's an agency trainer for Carmel Place Schools, which means she went through a really extensive training process so she can help support and train all of our teachers. So she's going to talk you through and do a little demo called Building a Mental Model. And what this does is really going to help you get behind the scenes of what's going on in a reader's head when they are reading words off the page and trying to make sense and comprehend. So I'm going to pass it over to Megan.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me tonight. Okay, so my job tonight is to really help us understand what is the goal of reading comprehension? And the goal of reading comprehension is to build a mental model. So before, I probably would have said it's to answer questions about main idea and details and to write a summary. But now, after going through all this training, I know that it's really to build a mental model. So first, I'd like you to take a look at this image up here and take 30 seconds just to see what are the components of this image. Okay, so what do you see right here? A student. All reading comprehension starts with the reader. In this case, it's our student or our scholar. What do you see right here? Yeah, it's a bowl right here, a mixing bowl, right? I'm going to have some volunteers come up here. I need a volunteer to come up and hold my mixing bowl. Come on up. You're going to stand right here. Thank you. All right, what do we have over here? It's what he's reading. It's the text. I need another volunteer to come up here. Thank you. You're going to be our text. Thank you so much. And then this is our, what is it? Long-term memory. I need a volunteer to be our long-term memory. Thank you. All right, you're going to hold these. Okay. All right, so I'm going to read our text tonight, and our text is about the zoo. And I'll have you stand in the middle of the mixing bowl, and then, yep, thank you. Okay, and as I read about the zoo, you're going to put some slips of paper into the bowl, okay? Okay, so when I read about the zoo, I read that the workers work around the clock to help care for the animals and help to feed the animals. Okay, yep. And I also read that the zookeepers feed the seals twice a day. There we go. And I also read that it's really expensive to care for all the animals at the zoo. Okay, so those are some of the facts that I read. These facts in the book are pouring in to this bowl right here. Okay, now my bowl, this is called phonological working memory. Say that. Phonological working memory. Okay, so can you click for me? Thank you so much. Okay, can I have a volunteer from the crowd read this sentence on the screen?
Started there? Doesn't matter. Holds the words in mind while the meaning of a sentence is assembled and words are linked within and across sentences.
Okay, so my question for you is, what does phonological working memory do? What does it do? It holds the word in mind, right? Why does it do that? So that we can make a meaning from what's happening, okay? So here's my phonological working memory. It's holding all this information that I'm reading about in my working memory there. At the same time, guess who's activated? Long-term memory. So as soon as I say the word zoo, you're probably thinking all the things you know about the zoo is coming to the forefront of your mind, okay? So now, can you click one more time? All right, can I have another volunteer read the other sentence about long-term memory? Thank you.
Long-term memory is employed when a reader conjures up previously learned ideas and information to make inferences about what is read and to construct the mental model.
Okay, so when long-term memory is employed, what is conjured up? Previously learned information. If I think about Scarborough's rope, that's the top strand. That's a background knowledge. All the knowledge I have is conjured up right away. So I'm going to tell you what's in our collective long-term memory about the zoo. How many of you have been to the zoo before? Yes? Okay. All right, so in our collective long-term memory, you know, I've been to the zoo with my own kids. I have 3 kids. We go to the zoo a lot in the summertime. So when I go to the zoo, it's really hot there. And one time last summer, my youngest, she's 2, she got to feed the kangaroos, and it was so special for her. So you can put some, yep, put some in there. And another time, I've been to the zoo with my kids on field trips. We've gotten to go to the zoo. One of my favorite parts with the kids is seeing the dolphin show at the zoo. All of those things are on our collective long-term memory, okay? That's perfect. So I'm going to stand right here. So I'm going to mix all this information, words from the text, words from my background knowledge, my long-term memory, and it comes out here, this beautiful collage of words from the text, information from the text, and what I know about that topic is mixed up in here, okay? But sometimes, here's what happens. These have X's on them. Okay, Sometimes it goes like this. Oh, I've been to the zoo before and there were so many animals. There were lots of dogs and cats there, and we got to pet them and hold them, and then I got to take one home. Is that student thinking about the zoo? What are they thinking about? Pet store, animal shelter, so put a couple of those in there. So sometimes what happens is that we have a mixture of information from the text, we have long-term memory, and we have inaccurate information, misinformation that's stored in our long-term memory. We all have that when we don't know everything about every topic there is. We all have that. And so our goal with the mental model here is that the more we read, the more we can weed out misinformation or inaccurate information. Okay? Thank you so much. You can take a seat. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so to debrief that, we have text going in, we have long-term memory information going in. That is our knowledge, it's our experiences, and it's all the language that we have about that. That all gets mixed up, and what we have is an adjusted schema. This adjusted schema is our mental model. That gets stored back in long-term memory, so the next time we read about the zoo or something similar, that comes back out to help us understand this new text. Now, two things I didn't talk about here are surface code and text space. Say surface code. Say text space. Okay, so with surface code, I want you to think about scratching the surface. Like you can touch the answer on the page. So if I said, the boy ran down the road as quickly as possible, and I said, who is that sentence about? You would say and what did the boy do? And where did he run? And how did he run? So you can find the answer by touching the answer on the page. The text space, say text space, that's the underlying meaning. That's the meaning behind those words. So if I said, why did the boy run down the road? You're probably thinking, why did he run? What comes to mind when you think, why did the boy run down the road? He was late. Where else? He's being chased, maybe by a dog, maybe by his friend. Why else? It was a race. How did you come up with these ideas? From your experiences, your background knowledge. So we have to have background knowledge in order to make inferences about the true meaning behind the text. All of that is important when it comes to developing our mental model, which is what the goal of reading comprehension is. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And so when in Carmel Clay Schools, our goal with teaching reading comprehension is to find a program that would align with helping us build that mental model. So you already have in the district, about a year and a half ago, we had a presentation with some students in the room with us to study word recognition and how we address word recognition. That's with our program Foundations. That is a program that's offered K through 3. Any student, though, that is still struggling with word recognition, that is the work of our interventionists or special educators to continue even beyond 3rd grade or to intensify our K through 3 students who are still struggling with that, making sure our kids are becoming proficient and fluent readers when we look at word recognition and fluency. So when we're looking, though, at language comprehension, so building a program that's going to really help us build that mental model and develop that wide knowledge that students need in order to be able to read and comprehend, we look to Wit and Wisdom. That was the program that we just adopted this year. And that Wit and Wisdom really covers all of the pieces all those strands that we find in that language comprehension side of the rope. And they do that by building deep knowledge about specific topics for students. And then we have a third program you might not hear as much about, and that is GEODS. GEODS are small group readers, and they really are the bridge between Foundations and Wit and Wisdom. So Wit and Wisdom and Foundations actually come from 2 separate programs. GEODS connects the 2 programs, so it does the scope and sequence of the phonics skills inside books, so kids who are emerging readers can read a decodable text that's aligned with the skills that they have learned so far, but then it's aligned with the Wit and Wisdom knowledge building themes. So what's great about that is in small group then, if a student still needs to really work on those phonics and fluency concepts, I can really teach into that within those texts. But if we have a student that's really proficient, because we have a lot of proficient readers, even as early as kindergarten, 1st grade, we can really lean into the knowledge side, the vocab side of those texts as well. Okay, and a little bit just about building knowledge with Wit and Wisdom. Wit and Wisdom does a great job with that deep knowledge building, and it draws from literature, history, social studies, and the arts. Compelling and complex texts are really at the center of this program. So you got to read two of our really exciting complex texts. I think you all were probably pretty excited to read those. Those texts are connected. The kids are going to help you understand that if you haven't figured that out yet today. You have also, just for your information, you can look at this through the presentation today, later this evening, a binder of all the different types of texts that kids will encounter. Just like Mrs. Schoaf shared, they need to read a lot to build that mental model, to build more information, to grow their knowledge and understanding of the world around them, but also to help take away some of that maybe inaccurate information they have, so that can feed forward in the future when they're reading independently related texts on related topics. So it really provides that meaningful context for applying and developing those language arts skills. And so when we think about Wit and Wisdom as a program, those knowledge building and texts are really at the center. And then the skills and those language strands all are embedded within the knowledge building and with the text. So basically, we're building that student's knowledge through instruction that integrates knowledge and skills. This is what Wit and Wisdom looks like for our third grade classroom. I know some of you guys are familiar with this. There are 4 modules in a year, so you study a module for about a quarter, so for about 8 weeks. The first module our third graders studied was the sea. Then they looked at outer space, and this is reading fiction, nonfiction, watching video, listening to audio, looking at artwork. And then our third module is a new home, and they'll finish the end of the year with Artists Make Great Art. And this is just an example of how a unit is organized with module learning goals. So you'll notice that there are knowledge goals within this unit. So this is the unit that the kids are in right now. They have some really specific knowledge goals about the history of immigration. They're learning about the Statue of Liberty and other monuments. They're learning about scale and perspective in art, challenges and traditions of immigrants who are coming to our country. And then within that are all these reading, writing, speaking, listening, language goals. Those are the goals of our standards. They're also the goals of the language comprehension strands of the book. Okay, so this is the part you've been waiting for. We're going to have our third grade students come on up and find your seat. And they're going to be walking you through a tiny portion of a third grade lesson. A Wit and Wisdom lesson typically is about 90 minutes long. So you're just going to get a sampling of that today. This is lesson 8, which is part of module 3. So they're still pretty early in this module. They've spent a lot of time initially learning about, for these books in particular, learning about Japan, so they could read these books and have background knowledge about Japan, learning some vocabulary about immigration, and really just kind of getting some knowledge starting to grow about this topic. And they still have probably about another 25 lessons to go. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lance. He's the third grade teacher here at Cherry Tree, and we have Caitlin Taylor is joining us as well. She's the instructional coach for that building. You need your mic here. And here's the clicker for you. Yep.
Hello. Oh, that's loud. Okay. How are we doing? Glad you guys are here today. My students, take a deep breath. I'm going to take 1, 2 with you. Okay, ready? All right. Hey, we're glad you guys are here. We're excited about what we're doing. And I'm just going to kind of roll in. I think that's probably the best way to go here. So today, we are going to look at, we're learning how to recount the events of a fictional text. Okay? And hopefully, when we're done here, we can identify story elements within a text, all right? All those different pieces of a text that make it up. And boys and girls, right, not just the easy stuff, right? We're going to kind of dig in and see what are the other pieces that we can learn from here. We won't get to do this today, but in class we did this to where we took that information, we composed a paragraph that recounts all the important story, or all the important events of the story, kind of piecing that together. That's how we kind of knew, hey, I've got this, or I still need a little bit more work here in this area. So really cool activity to start. We are going to listen to an interview Then we'll get into the story elements piece, and then we'll finish up with what we like to call a mix and mingle with some subject-verb agreement, just like everyone wants to do on a nice Monday night. Monday night? Yeah, nice Monday night here, okay? So really quickly, I'm going to play this clip. It's only about 55 seconds, okay? And you have the background knowledge of Tea with Milk that you read. And we are just going to listen to Ida Pearl. She's an immigrant from Poland that's going to speak about her experience coming here to America. As you're listening to this, I'd like you to think about how is her experience learning English similar to Masako's experience from Tea with Milk? And then how might it be different? So we're just going to listen, and then I'll give you guys some time to think, and then chat at your table real quick. All right?
And not too many people arrived here the year I came here. In fact, I was a novelty when I first arrived here because a lot of young people came from my street just to see what I look like. They asked my aunt, can you have her come outside? I want to see what she looks like, you know. And I couldn't speak English at that time, and they'd look at me and say, oh, you know, and then they'd go away. But then a few weeks later, I would walk to school with them, come home with them, and they would help me with the English language. And they would correct me in every which way, and they would help me with my homework, and they would want to know all about Europe. How is it down there? And of course, no matter how much you told them, it just wouldn't relate to them, because you would really have to go over there and see how things are, you know. And
Okay, I want you to, in just a second, I'm going to have you turn to a partner and have a discussion, but I want you to think, what was something that was similar to her experience about learning English, and what was something that was different than Masako and Ida's? How are they different, okay? Think about it for just a second. Get your answer ready. Okay, go ahead and turn to your partner and share.
So it's the same. It's different because people, her friends are like telling her stuff that like she has to answer, but she doesn't know that because she does not speak English, and she has to like wait. She has to like speak English and learn it, and then tell them how to.
Didn't in Tea with Milk, didn't the little girl grow up in America? So she probably, that's her first language, her main language. Whereas I think Ida, it sounded like she didn't speak English.
All right, back to me in 3, 2, 1.
That's good.
What was something that was similar between their experience of learning, Ida's experience of learning English and Masako's experience learning Japanese? Addie.
I I think it is when she walked home with her friends and her friends taught her how to speak English.
Okay, tell me more about that, Addie. Was that a similarity with Masako and how she learned, or was that a difference?
Similarity.
How was it similar?
Because she said that the one that we listened to, she literally said her friends would help her. Like when she walked home with her, they would help her learn English.
Okay, so Ida's
And
friends would
same
help her
with
learn English. Yeah.
And
Did,
the
Mas-
same.
did Masako have much help with English, boys and girls?
Yes,
How?
with her friends.
Masako's friends? I think we might want to think about the English teacher. Remember the English teacher? Did she try to help her at all? No, right? So I think that might be a difference that we have there, is that we have Masako who, when she went there, even the teacher that spoke English was not ready to help her. And then we have Ida, who at first didn't have someone to help her, maybe, right, Addie? And maybe that's what we're thinking of. But then over time, the neighborhood kids helped her to go to school. Can we think of a similarity? So how was their experience similar? Grace.
They both learned a new language.
Right, they both had to learn a new language. And can we even go a little bit further and say they both had to learn it not in a class? They're not in high school learning a new language. They're in a new country, right? And we kind of talked about putting ourselves in that point of view. That's a little scary, right? That's a little scary. So, awesome. Let's move on to looking at story elements. So, overall, our big essential question for the module is how do stories help us understand immigrant experiences? And we've started with these two stories here. And then for this arc of 15 questions, we're looking at what challenges do immigrants face in a new country? And also, we're working really hard on what kind of challenges would we have? Like, how could we put ourselves in those shoes and kind of see, that would be a little bit difficult, right? And we like to make sure we have questions. Jalen, I'm going to put you on the spot. When we do writing, what's one way we can hook a reader?
Make them interested in what you're gonna talk about.
Have we talked about using questions before? Yeah, because we talked about using a question, automatically your reader has to respond to you. So here we go. What's happening in Tea with Milk? What's going on with it? We're going to do an activity. You all have a poster behind you. It has 2 of the questions from the board. Okay? What we're going to do is, in just a second, I'm going to give you some think time. And then your group is going to go to the board, the one with the neatest handwriting, and you guys are going to discuss the 2 questions on your chart. Just your 2 right now, okay? Just use one color. That'll come back to play here in a minute. Just use one color, and I want you guys to discuss as a table group, and then when you come up with your answers, I want you to write them on the chart paper and then come back to your seats. And you can continue your discussion when you come back to your seats until we're ready to move on. Let's say 5 minutes to have a discussion, since we've all read the books, and then get our answers up on the board, please. All right, go.
The author, yeah. And then,
At the end of Milk with Tea, it says, then I was born.
and I was their first child. Yeah. So it's kind of from his perspective.
I'm sorry, let me pause real quick. Well, let's look at tea with milk. I know Lennon was saying grandfather and Masako. Let's look at just tea with milk for now when we're talking about the story elements.
Yeah, because I think he talks. Yeah, you're right. At the end, he says I. Yeah. Yes, exactly. You're right. Yeah.
I think it's like their dads, and then grandfather is like the main character, but they're still in the story, which means like at the end it shows like no one knew that you were in the story. It was mostly about grandfather.
And Masako. This is yeah, May and Masako. Yeah. Yeah. That was his mom, right? So he's all those things, right? He's this guy.
Yeah, both questions.
Masako's son and grandfather's. Yeah. Do you want to write that down? Does she have the best handwriting? I don't. I don't.
Eli.
Greg said no. Yeah. Oh, did you want to wear grandfather's? Everybody's different.
All right, about 2 more minutes here.
Okay. So then we can put the similarities between tea with milk and grandfather's journey.
I'll have to go home and do a little bit of work. Giving me more work to do.
All right, we're doing great. As you all are wrapping up writing, I want to give you your next steps here. When we finish up, you are going to stand up because we're third graders and we don't sit for very long. We've got about 5 sections in my classroom where we go to. So what we're going to do is you are going to rotate charts, and you and your group are going to look at the questions and the responses that the other group gave. If you want to add something, I want you to grab a different color and add it to the board. We're not going to take anybody's things off because that could lead to a discussion that we can have later on when we have more than 20 minutes to do this. But we're going to add it with a different color if your group decides, I think this was pretty important that we need to add to this. Okay? Makes sense? We'll have about 2 to 3 minutes to do that, and we'll rotate one more time when I say go. That way you'll have a chance to see everybody's story element responses. Okay? So just make sure you're picking a different color if you're going to add something to the board. Okay? We'll go Grace's table. You'll go here. Dr. Beresford's table. You'll go here. You guys, come over here. Go ahead. About 1 more minute here. And don't feel like you have to write something. If you like what they put down, we can all agree. All right, let's rotate one to your right, and now you'll have the chance to check out two groups' ideas to make sure that we have everything we need to answer our story elements. All right, when you finish, head back to your own table. No worries, no worries. All right, as Eli's finishing up over there, um, we won't do this piece of it, but there are a couple of the handouts. If you look at the handout AA, that would be like more of a, hey, next we're going to go take our ideas now that we've had this conversation. We're going to go add them to the story elements. Organizer, same questions, but still building that. But we will move on because, we don't have all the time in the world. But like I said, this is where we go. Next is where we went the next day or the next section. But today I want to finish up with why is subject-verb agreement important? Okay, and if y'all remember, we've been talking about subjects, which are nouns, and what are nouns? What are nouns? Not everybody at once, just one person. What are nouns? Yeah, Finley? Person, place, or thing. Asher, what did she say? Very good, Grace. What did Asher say? And Eli is just looking at me because I know what he wants to say. What do you want to say, Asher? Or I'm sorry, not Asher, Eli? Okay, very good, very good. All right, so we're talking about subjects are people, places, or things. Sometimes ideas. We'll get there, okay? And then verbs. What are verbs? Grace? Yeah, an action, right? And so we want to have sentences that have those subjects and the verbs, and that makes it a complete sentence. So that's all I'm going to say at the moment. We're going to dive back into that in about 1 minute. At your table, you have cards. You have cards. They have red Sharpie on them. Everyone grab one card. It does not matter what it says. Grab one card. Take one. One group will have an extra one, and Mrs. Taylor will participate with you. Over there, I think. Okay. So you have a card. I want you, in just a second, I'm going to have you stand, and I want you to find somebody, not necessarily at your table, I mixed them up, somebody in our group of 17, that you can put your card with their card, and it make a complete sentence. Go. When you found your person, stand next to them, showing me your cards. Face me with your cards so I can see them. There's supposed to be a period there. I'm sorry. No, there's not. Never mind. Awesome. I think we're there. Are you there? Okay, fantastic. Why did you choose your partner? Why did you choose what you chose? Because what I notice a lot of, one has capital letter and a word, and the other one just has another word and a period. Grace, why did you choose your partner? Okay, first of all, we talk about this a lot. Like, the sentence just makes sense, right? We can say my brothers laugh, right? Grace, why did you choose laugh? Why wouldn't it be laughs? My brothers laughs. Okay, right. What did you pick? So you picked my cousin yells, but the subject is only one cousin, but your verb has a S on the end. Your subject has an S on the end, but your verb doesn't. So you all picked the ones that match. You picked a subject and you picked a verb that agree together in singular or in plural, right? And again, a lot of times you would probably just know, right? The tree grow. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, thumbs down, right? Or the trees grows. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, Mr. Lance is going to lose his job if he keeps talking like this, okay? So you have picked the ones that align as a singular subject and singular verb, or plural subject and plural verb. Awesome. I will. You can just leave your cards on your table and head back to your table. Awesome. So that kind of wraps it. That's 3 different pieces that we would do in that lesson. There's a lot more to it. Hopefully you saw some verbal reasoning from the rope there, some literacy knowledge, comparing and contrasting, some sentence structure, some language structure, vocabulary, obviously some background knowledge, all of that in a 20, it's supposed to be 20 minutes, I apologize, Mr. Royal. All of that in a lesson there. And again, we would do more with this structure here. We would put it into obviously into the organizer, but that's not the end game. If you notice, we talked about similarities and differences. The long game here is we're in the middle of planning and writing a compare-contrast essay about the experiences that are similar from grandfather and the experiences that are different from grandfather Masako. So they're going to be comparing those 2 characters and their experiences. So, and naturally, we'll build like that. We do plenty of writing. So I think that's all I got.
Okay, and I think Mr. Lance also that what would happen after that subject and verb, you can see then we're going back into, that's okay, going back into the text that you've been reading and applying those skills in context of what we've been reading about here today. Okay, so we gave you a very short but in-depth primer on science of reading and also gave a nice little introduction to what it looks like In a typical third grade classroom, when we're getting in and using the science of reading and applying it to our daily reading and writing activities. So I'm going to pass it over to you all with any questions you have for me, or probably you don't want to hear from me, either Mr. Lance, Mrs. Taylor, or most importantly, our kids.
My question for the teachers and the students is, have you enjoyed this so far? You like it? How about the teachers? And why would be good, if you told me why.
You want to start and then call on
Yeah,
some kids?
I do enjoy it. It's hard as a teacher. It is hard. As a student, it is hard. And we have this conversation, wit and wisdom. And we've had the conversation that it's not we don't like it. It's just hard. It's new and it's hard for the teachers. It's new. It's hard for the kids. I think at least in third grade we have some pretty awesome topics. And so when we're talking about space and we're talking about oceans and we're talking about a new home and tying together ideas of exploration and how people got to where they're going and things like that, I find it personally, but I'm a loud, big guy that likes to have some fun. Like I find ways to make sure that we're staying engaged, we're moving around, and the kids are building that in. I think you should. I sent a video to Caitlin, and she sent it to Ann of the noise. So I don't know if you paid attention, but there's a page in Grandfather's Journey that shows Masako in Grandfather's Journey, but you didn't know that yet. And it's the title picture in Tea with Milk. So if you look at that, okay, and the moment that happened when we were doing, like just a picture walk through the book, my class was so loud, and it wasn't loud because we're ready for PE today. It was like the conversation was a buzz. There were groups of 4 on the ground doing this walk through the book, and it was just loud. I sent a video, like I said, I sent a video. It was so cool. So I enjoy it. I don't know. You guys talk. Push your button, sweetie. You just have to push your button. There you go.
I have a question because why do we have to do this?
The law. Grace, what do you think?
I don't know what I think.
So I think another thing I like about it, and when you talk about all the medias that are involved, the interviews, the art, dissecting all of that, there's so many avenues for kids to come in, no matter what their level of reading is. So yes, the text can be a little complex, but no matter where we're at, there's partnerships, there's groups that they can have discussions and then come to the conversation, right? You're in a group of 6 people here. You were able to have a safe conversation amongst 6. Get your thoughts down on the board with a teacher walking around, maybe guiding those thoughts a little bit, but now you feel safe because I left or Mrs. Taylor left. You're bored, and yeah, that's a good idea. So now what are you going to feel like, even if you're a kiddo that maybe struggles a little bit? You're like, oh, I feel good. I can answer this out in public. Now we're building some confidence, right, for every student. So I think the multiple entry points for kids to be successful in the program is really good. I really do.
And I can say, just in talking with teachers and doing observations, our teachers are saying it's some of the best writing, best thinking they've seen in years. And although it is challenging to learn, it's a very deep program. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of information for the teachers to process through to make that meaningful for kids, and the kids love learning deeply about things. We know that about kids. They love to be able to, somebody who was just telling me today that they were starting the American Revolution unit in 4th grade. Caitlin was sharing that a student after day 1 said, I can't wait to go home and read more about this American Revolution so that I can understand this book that we're going to be reading better. We also had another teacher or coach relate to me, this might have also come from you. Some kids were at a slumber party, and they were kids from different schools in the district, and something happened. They couldn't go to Laser Flash or wherever it was they were going to head that day. And then the mom left, and the mom was a teacher in the district, and came back, and the kids were all playing Wit and Wisdom that day. for the slumber party. But what was so great about it was that they all came with all this, the same knowledge from the different buildings. They were all getting the same information, building that deep knowledge. They were able to not just play school, but really talk about the things that they were learning about as they were playing school. So it was really cool unifying thread for our district. Also connecting into our arts programming and even like PE, our music classes, our art courses. I was just at Forestdale the other day, and they had a big family wax museum. I know Dr. Ostrike was there as well. Or no, you weren't at that one. Were you at that one? The science fair. But these kiddos had worked with the art teacher to do an animal research project. That was the end of module task. They all did research. This was first graders, but they worked with the art teacher to create the masks that they use in the background and learn more deeply about the animals in a different way than just doing the research.
I'll add one more thing because I could talk forever about anything. But our end of module task for Unit 1 was a didactic wall panel. Had no idea what that was before we started. If you don't know what it is, I completely understand. When you go to like a museum, zoo or whatever, and it has the information, like the animal and then the words about what's going on, that's what it is, okay? So we created those about giant squids and giant sharks going back. And then we went to the State Museum for a field trip, and I had kids like, oh, I was like, yes. So like building that information, they were able to, now they know what these are for and what they feel like, oh, we created this, right? We had an aquarium with all of our didactic wall panels up, which was really kind of a cool thing, but also brought some real life experience in for them going wherever.
Other questions? I don't know. No, I'll refer back to Dr. Beresford or our board members. I'm happy to answer a question after. Other questions?
I just had a quick question on, do you feel like this new, I know it's new this year, but do you feel like it's giving kids an opportunity to ask a lot more questions because it is so more in-depth? Do you feel like you're getting a lot more deep questions and just questions in general about the text and discussions that are better?
I do personally, yes, and I saw it last year. I piloted this unit last year, the whole unit, and the growth that I saw of question asking was really good. Sometimes I tell our kids, I think sometimes they try almost too hard to find the deep understanding sometimes when the answer is just right there. But yes, I do find a lot more curiosity, and I think that part of that is, as teachers, as we get more comfortable with the curriculum, figuring out ways to set up that curiosity will be important. But it does lend itself to, are we ever going to find that big giant squid that has been elusive to Clyde Roper? I mean, are we going to find this thing, right? And so, yeah, I do believe, we're third graders. It's not a daily, minute by minute basis, but yes, I do believe on a regular, I would say a daily basis, there's a few that are like, yeah, that's a good question. And some of the lessons too lend themselves to more deeper questions, the way they're set up. Some are more like, hey, notice and wonder day. We're going to read a new book. We're just going to kind of notice some things. Or like a day, okay, now today we're going to come up with we're going to look at the central meaning of the text, and we're going to use what grandfather says, how he feels, and what his actions are, evidence from the text to try to prove what the central message might be. Or we're going to use repeated words, or we're going to use illustrations to try to come up with a central message of the text. So I think it has nothing but it has all the opportunity to lend itself to those deeper thoughts and questions. And I think the more the kids get used to it as well in the younger grades and they continue to come up, the more they're going to be ready to be like, oh yeah, I can ask this. I'm curious about this. I mean, 2 to 3 questions a day is what we, kind of the focus, trying to get the kids focused about this is what we're doing today. And it's all question based to make sure that their brains are thinking and getting going. Yeah.
Is that pretty typical across all the grades with the number of questions? Or is it a little bit dependent on age, I'm guessing?
It really, honestly, the work that we do in third grade is similar to the work you do in kindergarten versus fifth. All of it is really, we have craft questions we do every day, I should say we have content framing questions that we work on every day, which are really about close reading and going through stages of starting with noticing and wondering, all the way down to distilling and revealing. So you're basically engaging in close reading. That's what we also do in our high school classes, by the way. It's close reading and annotation, so using evidence from the text to support your thinking. And the same with writing. They all follow that similar structure and process. We also work with students as part of the program. Socratic seminars are embedded kindergarten through 5th grade. And so Socratic Seminar is a collaborative conversation run by students that's all centered around a question. And those questions are the essential questions. So every module has an essential question, and then there are focusing questions underneath each of those essential questions that we work on throughout the unit.
2 lessons ago, we did 2 lessons after this one. Socratic seminar was, did Masako make a good choice to stay in Japan? So kids had to go. We prepared for it. We looked back through the text. We used some stuff they've already done, and so now they have to come up with, pick a side, and kind of have a discussion on, did she make a good choice to stay? Yes or no, and why? Right. So that would be.
And using evidence from the text to support their
Right,
thinking
yes,
is always
evidence from
part
their
of
text,
that.
evidence they've written down in their journals that they can use. We've got posters up in the room about some things, all preparing for that conversation, but really using that evidence. And I heard it here tonight, like my kids know every time, well, the text says, my heart just gets so happy. My heart gets so happy when we can use the text to give us some evidence. So.
This was great, so thank you for the live action demonstration. So this is year 1, right? And I know from quality time with Dr. Dudley earlier today about how we evaluate curriculum. Can you speak, though, because it's year 1 of rolling this out, a little bit about evaluation based on student outcomes? You know, we know about I read, I learn, all of those things. So can you sort of tie all of that together for us?
So how is it impacting student outcomes right now?
Right. I know it's super early.
Yes, it's very early.
So what are we looking for? How will we as a board look to help evaluate that?
I mean, there's multiple ways that we look and the different data points we use to evaluate the efficacy or the how well the quality of a program and its implementation. Typically, in a year 1 implementation, you will see an implementation dip. So we did our first round of NWA testing, fall to winter. Some of our teachers, they were so excited because the quality of what they were seeing in the classroom with the writing, speaking, the depth of thinking that was happening in the reading, they thought their NWA was going to go off the charts. But now think back to, they've only probably implemented 1 unit at that point when they took maybe 1.5. Our scores were pretty, in some cases, there was some huge growth in, I think, kindergarten and 2nd grade when we compared fall to winter. And then everybody else stayed pretty comparable to what we did last year, at least for this short little period of time. So we didn't really have a dip, but we had some strong growth in a few areas. What we know about testing and with knowledge building, it's kind of a cumulative effect. Knowledge grows knowledge grows knowledge. So we anticipate we're going to see continued growth and success on those scores. And we hope to see that as we continue some of these high stakes tests such as iRead. It's going to take a little bit of time to really see, I think, that impact, but we're anticipating we're going to see some really good growth here in the next year or 2. The other piece with iRead is not just about language comprehension, it's also about decoding. So for many of our kids, the first thing that we really have to attack is that word recognition piece. So we are, for all kids, what's great about Wit and Wisdom is that we're not saying to a student that is still struggling with word recognition, we're going to give you simpler text, less complex text. We're still going to give them that complex text. We might have to help them through the reading of it because we want their learning and their thinking and their knowledge to continue to grow and expand, because that's going to help them once that word recognition catches up. That's going to help them excel and soar once those 2 pieces, those 2 sides of the rope come together. So we are watching that data very carefully. I anticipate, based just on the qualitative conversations what I've heard from teachers, we'll start to see that growth with iLearn, iRead, and NWA. Dr. Dudley, I don't know if you want to share. Is that okay? All right.
You know, this is difficult. I can testify to trying to work through the exercises. And I understand the word recognition is a very important component. I think those charts are really good at explaining with the rope. That was a really good way to portray that. The English language learning students that are going to struggle more with the word recognition as they're trying to learn the language itself. How do you deal with those in
Sure.
the program?
It's challenging, but science reading really helps us with this. So we know they need to learn the phonics of English. However, what's not unique, but what we have to pay special attention to with our language learners is that they have to have the language side to connect to the word recognition more than ever. Because if I try to keep teaching you a letter, a sound, and a word, but you don't have anything to attach that to, you're not going to be able to hold on to it. So when we work with our language learners, we work with supporting their vocab. So Wit and Wisdom has some really nice ML language supports and as an actual extra guide that goes along with it that helps target specific vocab for language learners from the unit. So they say, of all these words you're going to learn, really focus in on these words. Has language structures for you to teach in, so really teaching into that syntax. Syntax is really challenging for our language learners, so doing explicit instruction in syntax. And then we carry along the word recognition alongside of that for students. So we have to, for language learners in particular, we can't keep those sides of the rope separate. We have to bring them together. Okay.
A couple questions. So I know, I really liked those charts as well, because in our house, we have somebody that struggles with reading, but comprehension is really good. But when you showed us where the words were missing, you can see how if you can't recognize the words or see them or read them, it really skews your learning ability. Yet you can't give regressive texts because then
Exactly.
intellectually they're not growing with their peers.
Correct.
So that was really insightful. And I would imagine that these books, they're so engaging that I liked the fact that it seems that they would appeal to all sorts of readers because the pictures were so beautiful and the ideas were very complex. So I think that I liked that. The other question we struggle with, at least in our house, or I do, is are the students doing, it was so gratifying to see that they're the actual paper books and the writing pieces rather than just always being on Chromebooks.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking through their journals and you can see it's just a different skill of actually writing. So is there a good balance of that in all grades?
I would say with Wit and Wisdom, we pretty much everything is done paper pencil. So the books are in hand, the writing is in their workbook or in their writer's notebook. And there's also a pretty large research base on the impact of learning to write and writing with paper pencil to being able to read and spell. So we want kids to engage in paper pencil writing as much as possible, particularly in those younger grades, because that's helping them process print, helping them become better readers and writers. As they go up in age, some of those notebooks, I know some schools are moving over to, they might do some of that work in an online journal, like in a Google Doc. They might do some of those, you might do a little bit of reading if there's a digital text in the older grades that the teacher shares with everybody. That might come down into a Chromebook so they have their own copy. But I would say predominantly with Wit and Wisdom at the elementary grades, we're really focused in on writing on paper, reading text on paper. All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Lance, and to Mrs. Taylor, and all these amazing kids for coming and hanging with us this long today. And we just appreciate all that you've done for our students, and for our students, thanks for hanging with us and being such great examples of amazing students that we have here at Carmel. Thank you.
Awesome metaphor.
Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. Much appreciated. Next up on our agenda, we have a short meeting today, is your updates, Dr. Beresford.
All right. Hey, tonight I am representing the Wolves of West Clay. So you can see that got some cool swag from West Clay, and wanted to just represent them and their wonderful administrators, Principal Jill Superwomanship, and their amazing assistant principal, Heather Banks. I attended the West Clay International Festival on Friday, January 31st. Greg was there as well. I don't know if anybody else showed up that night. But I witnessed firsthand how the staff, the parents, students, and the community work together to make West Clay a special place for kids to learn and grow. So I thought I would have everybody howl tonight for the Wolf Nation, but instead I think we'll just give them a Carmel clap. So let's just, outstanding. Wanted to let you know, if you didn't know, Carmel High School girls swimming and diving team are sectional champs. Not only did they win the sectional, all 27 of the competitors qualified for state and are heading to state finals. The Lady Hounds will be seeking their 39th consecutive state title. That means I was in my 20s with a full head of hair when that streak started, and here we are at 39. They've been national champions 8 times, and they were named a Distinguished Scholar Team in 23-24 with a 4.02 team GPA. That means everybody on the team was better than perfect. So we wish them well on Friday prelims and then the finals on Saturday, and can hardly wait to see how that goes. Extremely proud also that 15 Greyhounds have been named United States Presidential Scholar Candidates. Now, only 4,000 students across the whole country are named as candidates. And then the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program was established in 1964 by executive order of the President to recognize and honor some of the nation's most distinguished graduating high school seniors. Over that time, the program extended to recognize students who demonstrate exceptional talent in visual, creative, and performing arts and accomplishment in career and technical education fields. So it's really a broad capture of different kinds of students doing really good work. Each year, up to 161 students are named as presidential scholars. It's one of our nation's highest honors for high school students. Indiana will have 1 male and 1 female student, and we've got a streak going here at Carmel of having at least one. One year we had both of them. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one, how that goes. I also wanted to share with you that the Highlight, which is Carmel High School's online newspaper, won the Hoosier Star Award for their website newspaper. And the award is from the Indiana High School Press Association, and like that would be the equivalent of winning the state championship, like in athletics, and that's because you're getting that from the Indiana High School Press Association. The Highlight has been named a Hoosier Star finalist for 23 consecutive years, and has won the award 19 times. So this year's award makes the 6th consecutive Hoosier Star for the Highlight. Of note, the yearbook Hoosier Star is not announced yet. So the Pinnacle kids may still be in the hunt for that, but that's going to be announced later. So stay tuned for that. Carmel High School journalism students also performed well in the Rowena Harvey Award competition, and they call them the Harvey Award. She was a newspaper advisor up in South Bend for many, many years. And Carmel students earned 37 awards in 25 categories. They had 16 first place, 11 second, and 10 third place awards. I read through all the awards. They swept first, second, and third, and 3, I think, and then had 2 out of the 3 and another 3 or 4. So they really did a fine job. I couldn't be proud of these students, the advisors, and not to be left out. Your Creekside yearbook kids also got an award, and they were the only middle school to win an award at the competition. And so kind of the literacy that we saw tonight, that you see it kind of show out, at the things like this where our kids are being, very competitive in the state with their writing and in other mixed media. I wanted to also share the Creekside A team won the National Science Bowl regional competition this past weekend, so they punched their ticket to the national championship. And another Creekside team placed fourth. So, that's a lot of scientists out there. Keep that in your back of your mind. Finally, the bell ringer. And the bell ringer tonight is kind of a different one for me, but I'm going to give it to the Winter Theater production of Brainstorm. That opened on Thursday night and ran through Saturday night. It was performed in the newly renovated Black Box Theater, which was really cool, the way they had it set up. And it was a very fun, kind of touching at times. It was interactive at times, and it was educational throughout the whole play, because the play was about the teenage brain. And so, and how a growing brain can lead to, well, being a teenager, and how that all connects and sometimes doesn't. The performers would explain like a part about brain development, and then the rest of the actors would then show how that development acts out in real life. And so you can imagine sometimes it was very happy, sometimes it was really distraught, and it just went on and on and on. Carried every emotion and the stressors of living in what I call middlehood, which is somewhere in between childhood and adulthood, and which is where a lot of our teenage brains live. And it was amazing, just amazing show how they did it. The lighting, the sound, the mixed media that was in it, the kudos to the actors, the tech crew, student and staff directors, so many others, the parents. Brainstorm made my day, it made my week, it made my month. It was really one of those special times that I'll always keep with me as time goes on. And that concludes my superintendent's report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you, Greg. Meeting adjourned.